'Cause fishing, it's in my soul.
Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
Hello and welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast. My name is Rich Natoli, back again with another cool episode with Justin Ritchie, who was just on last week to talk with us about his trip targeting striped bass. But we're going to go in a different direction today, and we are going to talk all about, I'm going to say saltwater kayak fishing, but it doesn't necessarily, I wouldn't say it's necessarily limited to saltwater, but that's the way that we're going to go. So let's bring Justin in here, head of tackle for Salt Strong. Justin, how you doing today?
What's going on, my man?
I'm just looking forward to talking about kayak fishing and all the cool stuff that we get to bring with us and load down our kayaks with on every single trip.
See, you make it sound like we bring 100 pounds extra with us, and you can. I know a lot of people that bring like literally everything in the kitchen sink with them, but a lot of it isn't necessary, right? Like there's a handful of items that each angler holds special to them, on the water, whether it is to streamline the efficiency of moving around their kayak or handling a fish, or we talked off record here, a couple things you're always mindful of, but you don't, in terms of enjoying your day on the water and being effective as an angler, you don't need to take a whole bunch of stuff with you. But there are a handful of things that you and I have experienced over 10 plus years of kayak fishing together that are essential, that are very important in their own regards, like in their own category, right? So I'd probably say I'm retired at this point,
Yeah.
but I did a lot of kayak tournaments from 2012 through 2016, competed in the Hobie World Championship overseas, and did a lot of inshore IFA tournaments here in the Southeast, and did well. And from that time, I learned how to streamline what I take out on the water with me so that I'm not cluttered, so that in those moments that I have to think quickly and think effectively and make good judgment when it comes to changing lures or managing a fish boat side or picking up and going as quickly as possible from A to B so I can get to a spot when the tide changes or whatever. There are a couple things that come to mind that I always have to have with me. The first one that I can think of is, it's kind of a twofer, and it's more of a fish management device. So whether that be a lip gripper or a landing net or even both, I do take both out on the water with me. They have their own utility in different situations, but let's take a landing net, for example. A landing net out of a kayak is kind of a tricky thing because traditionally landing nets are pretty big. And over the past decade or so, companies have found ways to streamline landing nets to be more geared towards paddle crafts or wade anglers, or, something that's small, compact, can float, which I can't stress enough, even though I'm fishing only a foot or two of water, that floats, because the last thing you want is to lose a fish because you drop your net in the water in the murky 5+ feet of water and can never find it again. But having something compact and streamlined. So I have it's called a floating trout net, and it's kind of oval in shape, if you will. It's not like a traditional circle, because that long streamlined profile makes it easy to tuck back and keep it in line with my kayak.
Yeah.
I think a lot of landing nets are big and round. And there's some are still great. Some have arm supports. You can brace up against your arm to land and support a fish. I really like that style. I think Yak Attack makes one.
Yes.
But a landing net, for me, needs to be ultimately what is most comfortable for you to hold and use. It needs to float, and it needs to be able to stow away very easily. And in addition to that, I'm mindful of the material of the net itself. So I do want a rubber coated net. Or just an actual rubber net. No, take away the coating altogether. Something that is a soft mesh, and not have very large pores on them or a very large opening mesh size in the net. Because there are times that if you get like a nice sea trout, for example, if I want to handle a 22-inch sea trout and he's a long, skinny sea trout, there are some nets that they'll find their way, to Houdini through that mesh size. It's pretty crazy. But a soft rubber net that can get wet and retain the slime coat on the fish. They're extremely stressed out. I'm 100% catch and release inshore, but if I'm offshore, it's a different game. But to be able to manage that fish boat side, I think of trout in particular. And again, on the tournament mindset, you do not want to miss a fish boat side that pulls the hook or breaks off because you didn't have a way to contain them or manage them.
Yes.
So the landing net's one part, and then the lip gripper, the fish grip, the original fish grip is it's polypropylene kind of custom tool, and it's like it's a modified version of the Boga grips, right? Boga grips came out many years ago, and they're great as a scale, and in my opinion, they're great in terms of a secure connection if you intend to harvest a fish. But for many of us that are catch and release, those Boga grips can be pretty harmful to the lower jaw of the fish. And the fish grip, the original fish grip, handmade, it's made over in Texas, USA product, and it applies just the right amount of tension when you click down on it to secure the fish. And I've learned works for some fish, not for others.
Right.
It's not one does everything, but it is great for managing redfish, black drum, bigger snook, some animals that have a little more meat in their mouth and their lower jaw, especially from a revival standpoint. So in the summertime, if I get a big redfish and I want to use my Hobie and the pedals on my kayak and pull some water through the fish's gills, if I'm in an area that's shallow and I don't have current, I can put the lip gripper on, pedal in any direction out in open water and oscillate and move, undulate the fish left and right and work out lactic acid, help them ram ventilate and flush water through their gills to get oxygen. So that's a helpful tool, not just to manage my fish, but to help make sure they swim away safely and healthy. So that's that. I guess that's really a twofer. So fish management device for me is big.
Yeah, and I'll just say I use a Ego 2 net, so telescoping net. I have to have the bigger basket on it for the larger striped bass. So I tend to go with one of those. One thing I will say, don't go too cheap on those guys, because I did that for years because I kept losing them because most of them don't float. And the one that I had was so weak that it would actually flex when I try to drive it through the water to net something. And I ended up missing a lot of fish. So it changed the game when I got the Ego 2. It's a great net, doesn't float, but I have a system on my that I go through in handling that net, so I know where it is at all times. It is actually secured on the deck of the kayak, not sticking up in the air to catch the wind. And as far as the fish grips, I love that one that you were talking about, the plastic or propylene one. I use that for the larger fish, striped bass always. I try never to touch a striped bass with a net. Try not to. Sometimes I will. Depends on what I have available. But for flounder or fluke, I do use the Boga style grips because I find it tears their jaw less than the larger one, which actually ends up separating the chin, the lower part of the mouth sometimes on those fish. So if I'm releasing them, I'm always using the smaller grips on the fluke. But yeah, so I have the two grips lashed inside the cockpit, and then I have the net laid down and secured across the front of the kayak. So great items there. I'm going to throw out to you, and if people know me outside of this, I'm very focused on safety when you're out on the water. And one of the things that I'm going to have two different topics talking in relation to safety, but I'm just going to say safety broadly for the first one. And that's going to be having a VHF radio and a knife tethered to your body. So when you are on the water, I recommend, and I don't care if you're fishing Pamlico Sound in North Carolina in 1 foot of water, you have a VHF radio tethered to you along with a knife. And part of the reason is if you go over, when your phone is wet, you cannot dial your phone unless you use the voice control. But sometimes all the water dancing on that screen will actually override the voice functions, even with the waterproof iPhone or a waterproof Android, and you can't actually use the phone while it's wet or your hands are wet. So you want a VHF radio, all you have to do is hit that emergency button and on channel 16 and you got the Coast Guard. The knife, I think, is absolutely critical. And I can tell you this from personal experience with capsize and 40-degree water, mile and a half offshore. I went over and my fishing lines got caught all around my legs. And I didn't want to stay in the water. And I also couldn't kick. So the water wasn't deep, but it was about 8 feet. I'm only 6 feet. So it was too deep. So I couldn't stand. And there I am, not able to kick. So I took the knife that was tethered to me right across my chest, took that out, cut the lines, the rods dropped to the bottom. I lost the rods, but I was able to function out on the water. I was able to go through my recovery steps and, I lost a couple of rods and some equipment, but I didn't lose myself. So I think that's important. The other thing is, look, it's always good to have a knife. I would just say this about the knife. I highly recommend getting a diver's knife with a blunt tip. You do not want a sharp tip on that knife, nor do you need it, right? You're not out there filleting fish. That's not what this is for. This is for emergency situations and real quick cuts of anything. Let's say you lose your whatever, and it's just convenient to grab the knife to cut something real quick. You want to cut some braid or something like that. You want a flat tip. You don't want a sharp tip on there. What do you think about that?
That's a really good point. I'm thinking of the times that, and this segues into for me, the second thing that is most important to have out there. For me, pliers, and I want to tell you a story.
Yeah.
So I was fishing offshore out of the kayak down in Pompano Beach near Fort Lauderdale. And for those of you that know, the shelf where it starts to drop out deep in Florida, it's pretty close to land down there. You only go about 1.5 miles, maybe 2 miles max out, and you're in 300 feet of water. And then it starts dropping very quickly from there. So you could target kingfish, blackfin tuna, sailfish, all kinds of, wahoo, mutton snapper, all the crazy good stuff. And you can see land pretty easily, all the landmarks and everything. And I remember I'm handling a nice kingfish. Like I hooked a 15 or 20 pound kingfish. It's in my lap. It's been gaffed. It's incapacitated. But the stinger rig with the wire that I used to make sure that the fish didn't bite off my rig, it's all mangled in the face.
Yeah.
And my pliers at that time, I think I had an older set of pliers. They were rusted. They wouldn't open well. The side cutters were messed up. And I must have just been fishing so much that fell to the wayside, and I was not organized and prepared. And I could not cut the rig near the fish's mouth. And my side cutters were so dull at the time that I couldn't cut even the main line that connected to the rig. It was just, I think I was running 40 or 50 pound mono, and the side cutters were off center. So they didn't have the ability to side cut. I was just trying not to rip things out of the fish. So I grabbed my knife, and it did not have a blunt tip. And I was kind of shaking and bobbing up and down in 2 foot seas, and I ended up stabbing myself.
Yeah.
And that sucked. I think I hit my thumb in just a manner to where it wouldn't stop bleeding. And I'm like trying to wrap it in a tear off piece of my performance shirt and, put pressure on it and then still figure out how to cut the line. And I've never thought about that. And man, if there's somebody out there, if there's a brand or a particular model, like a diver's knife that does have that blunt tip, because I do not think about that. And I don't know if a lot of anglers think about that. They just think about, I just need a knife for $6 or $7, whatever. It'll stay on me. I'll keep it sheathed. Dude, so smart. And I don't know who makes them, but I would definitely encourage that as well. Don't do what I did and frantically accidentally stab yourself because you didn't have a blunt tip knife. I wish I had that in that moment.
Well, so full disclosure, I learned that by a similar story to yours, where I went out with just a regular fillet knife, and it was as sharp as a fillet knife, and it didn't hurt when it got me, but it didn't stop bleeding. The one that I have is actually called Scuba Choice, And it's just a very inexpensive one that I got on Amazon. It's like $15, something like that. So, we're not talking about anything that's, anything that's pricey, but it holds up in the salt water. I've had it for over a year, and but it's got the blunt tip on it. So look that up and you'll see what I mean. But I think it's good. But talking about those pliers, do you have pliers that you recommend?
Yeah. So I remember, let's say 2011. I worked for Gander Mountain at the time, and these big box stores must have had an affiliation with Danco or a similar company, and they would run promos on solid aluminum pliers with side cutters. You'd get them for $20 or $30 a piece. Again, that was 10 years ago. Things have gone up in price since then, but they were always good. They would get the job done for a year. I would say, for me, investing in a quality set of aluminum pliers with a good set of side cutters that you can access. And if you do maintain your pliers well, whether it's using WD-40 or rinsing them off, soaking them in fresh water, just make sure they don't get rusty. You can change out those side cutters pretty cheap. It's like a $5 or something like that. And a hex key, you can take off the carbon tungstide cutters that clip together and put on a fresh set of cutters. A quality set of cutters. For me, I use Danco Tournament Duffies. They've been around for a while. They've been a benchmark in that $40 to $50 price range. I'm not talking going and getting a $300 pair of Van Stalls. Like, sure, those are nice if you're on a boat, but in the kayak, as you and I've learned, you're going to lose things. It happens. Tethers only do so much, and sometimes you don't tether. But I would encourage you to stay away from the economy, go to Lowe's and get a pair of needle nose plier focus, because not only are those center cutters that are molded in with the pliers not efficient at cutting braid and monofilament long term, because they're going to dull out and you can't really replace the cutting section when it dulls. You just need a new set of pliers altogether. But they're not going to feel good in hand. Those tend to rust much faster, I found, than however these Dancos are assembled and put together. I've used a lot of different pliers over the years from various brands. There's no other one in particular, but I just felt like the Dancos, I don't have issue. I don't have like restriction. It doesn't rust or corrode. And if I need to change it, like, I've put a lot of torque and pressure on those pliers and I'm trying to get a hook out of a fish. So aside from the ease of quickly changing out my lure, retying my leader, cutting my tag ends with those side cutters, the torque that I can put down on those pliers, if let's say I go for tarpon, okay, and tarpon have really bony mouths, and I successfully button hook and actually pierce through the top mouth with a 7/0 circle hook on a tarpon, it's really difficult to get that out by hand.
Yeah.
You need some pressure, and you need a strong, sturdy set of pliers to pop that hook out. And these inexpensive pliers for $15, $20, sometimes when you put all that pressure and you crank down on it, they're gonna shift and they're gonna bend out of place. And then at that point, they're useless.
Yes.
Not only can you not get that hook out of the fish, now you've got a messed up set of pliers and they're trash. So don't make that mistake. I'm not saying you need to spend $100+ on a set of pliers. $40, $50 gets it done. And the Dancos have been a good product for me over a long period of time. I've gone through 5 or 6 in the past 10 years, mostly because I've lost them.
Yeah.
Not because they just trashed out on me. So I give that a big thumbs up.
All right. Awesome. I personally use, I have some cheap aluminum ones, and I bought 2 at once. I'm on the second pair because I broke the tip off of one on a brown shark. I didn't want my hand getting any closer. Ouch. And I got it. I mean, I hooked it hard right in the corner of the mouth, and it was in the bone. And as I was pulling it out, it thrashed, and it broke the tip off of the thing. So I just took my knife out and cut the line right at the hook and let it go. At that point, I was like, I'm not putting my hand any closer to this
with your blunt tip knife, right?
Yeah. Well, it was the blunt tip knife. Yes, exactly. So it wasn't very,
Just imagine, trying to handle your shark boat's kayak side, and it's not a blunt tip knife. And like that would
be bad.
I'm playing the nightmare in my head because I've been there so many times and I've never had that. Like that is the smartest thing. I've never thought of that, dude.
Yeah.
So like that's going to stick with me now. Anytime if I come through an academy or a Bass Pro Shop or somewhere, I'm going to look for a blunt tip knife, or I just might go to a dive shop. I might go to, Scuba USA.
There's some really good, they're really good dive knives that are like that. And it was actually a diver that recommended that I get one. And his recommendation was get a cheap one off of Amazon and make sure you like it first and appreciate it, and then invest in a good one. And a good one that he said is about $50. But it's strapped to you in a sheath, a plastic sheath, so it's not going anywhere, and it can hold up to the salt. So that's what I did. All right, let me roll into my next category. Again, I'm going to be safety related on this one. My last category is not going to be safety related, but this one, I'm going to call it recovery. And if you capsize, you need to be able to recover yourself. Never plan on relying on anyone else. Even if you're out with somebody else, it is safer for you to self-rescue than to have somebody else get involved and start leaning and doing anything to help you. So the two things that I'm going to say are absolutely critical. Number one is a good, solid PFD. You have to have a PFD. And I don't care if you fish Pamlico Sound, which I fish a few times a year. It's about 1 foot in most of the areas that I go. And I always have my PFD on. You never know what's going to happen. You never know if you're going to, pass out, faint, get hit by a boat. One inch of water will drown you as fast as, or 1 foot of water, whatever it is, just something that'll help you to stay up. Normally I am fishing deep waters in the mid-Atlantic though. So it's not uncommon that I'm in 30, 40, 50 feet of water with a lot of current. And it definitely helps. When I capsized in that cold water, I couldn't kick, but I had my PFD on. So I was still fine. I was still bobbing at the top. And then a paddle float. Paddle float is, if you don't know what that is, it is basically just a fabric balloon that you blow up. Usually the better ones have 2 chambers, and you just blow it up through the tube and you just put it on the end of your paddle and you just strap it on there. So now you have almost like a balloon, just a really strong balloon on the end of the paddle. And all you have to do is put the other side of the paddle perpendicular or straight across the deck of the kayak, hoist your leg over there and just shimmy on up that and right back into the cockpit. It is great for fat guys like me. It is great for people that just don't have the physical ability or desire to test their physical ability to get back in. I have used it for myself. And I'll tell you this, I actually can get back into my kayak without it. I've practiced and I can, but there's no reason to. It takes about 20 seconds to take it out from under my seat where I store it, blow it up, put it on there, and just very simply get back up and into the kayak. Even in bad weather, which is what capsized me, I was back in under 2 minutes into that kayak and just ready to go. So I recommend a paddle float for anyone. It is also good if you go out, Justin, you and I go out and you hurt your back and you fall in, let's say a boat hits you and you go in. Well, rather than me holding onto your kayak or holding onto you and getting myself in danger, all I have to do is grab your paddle, put that on, and you can just slide right back in. So it's also good if you're out with other people to help them out of a bad situation. So I use a Wiseman Trading paddle float. It's a dual chamber and it's pretty cheap. It's only like $30, but it will change your life. It can change your life for the best. And I've given it to other people to use in an emergency cold water situation, and they were able to very quickly get back in. So that'll cover my recovery items.
That's pretty scary. We don't get cold conditions the way you do up north down here in Florida. To us, if you're out on the water and it's in the high 30s, low 40s, that's a cold, miserable day in Florida. That's not fun. You guys will do that, and that's like beginning of spring. All right, season starts.
Yeah. I mean, striped bass, they're biting all through that, and the spring run. Now, the fall run, it's coming off of the warm water, so it's typically warmer. But, February, March, April will be, especially at the opening of striped bass in the backwaters, you'll be hitting 30-degree, upper 30s in the water temperatures, and the air will be 20 degrees. So, yeah, it can be scary. So you want to make sure that the last thing you have to worry about is getting back in, because that water will kill you. Even in a dry suit, which is what we wear, you still have to get out of that water.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of times, the coldest day on the water I've ever had out of the kayak, I was in Cedar Key. That's kind of around the Big Bend of Florida as you head towards Apalachicola and all that stuff. It was like a high of 45 for the day and blowing 20, 25 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And I thought in that moment, I had a tandem kayak. I was in college, and my hands got so cold because I didn't know how to layer. I was a dumb early 20-year-old something that just kayak fishing with a buddy. It got so cold I could not even grip the paddle.
Yeah.
And I thought in that moment, man, if any of us fell over, there's no cell service out there, where the wind and current were rushing so hard in the same direction, we had a hard time paddling back. It would have been game over.
Yeah.
So it really does put some perspective. I think of those scary moments I've had, and I want to add another one. We didn't even talk about this off record. So another story, I did what's called a Sailfish Smackdown tournament down in Fort Lauderdale. It's one of the Extreme Kayak Series tournaments. And, I'm in my early 30s, and I felt like there was a point in time I felt invincible. And fishing for sailfish, the weather conditions are not great. You're usually fishing, it's in January. It's cold, it's windy, it's rough out, especially offshore in 200 to 300 feet of water. Seas stack up 3, 4, 5 feet. And that's great sailfish conditions, but it's not great safety conditions for being out in the kayak. Had my life vest on, took minimal tackle out there, but I took so many waves over the bow of my kayak, and I had so much water in the back from my live well, the water started to siphon in through one of the entry points that hold the cables for your rudder.
Yeah.
And I took on excess water to the point where I wasn't balanced, like I was starting to take on water at a slow, steady rate. And I remember my kayak starting to sit lower and lower in the water column, and I was losing speed pedaling. I tried to lean to the left or the right, and it really felt like that whole kayak was going to topple. I panicked. I had a VHF radio. I called for help for somebody in the tournament, and they had a manual bailer.
Yep.
I was able to open my center hatch and just pump water out for the next 5 to 10 minutes. Come to find out, I got back on land, and I did have a small hairline crack in the back of one of my scuppers, and that's how the water was making its way in. But man, that was scary. I could have sunk my kayak offshore in the middle of a tournament in rough conditions. And even though there's 50 other competitors that are crazy like me and a help boat, that was also one of the scariest moments.
Yeah.
So if you plan on, for me, in shallow water the entire time, you think your kayak you can stand, that's one thing. But if you traverse over any sort of deep water where you're going to be coming back in rough conditions where you can run the risk of a lot of water getting into your kayak, I always have it when I launch off the beach. I'm fishing near shore or offshore. That's always on me because I'd hate to be out there and not have a way to get to some sort of land quickly. God forbid anything happens. So that's something I end up keeping for quick access. I can put it in the center part of my kayak. I put a square hatch on my outback instead of the round hatch. So it's much easier to get in and grab, but just have it within access if you anticipate being in rough conditions.
Good point. Good tip.
I have one more, man. I mean, we've talked about a lot.
Yeah.
Safety, fish management, good pliers, a blunt knife. That's the gold star for this talk. For me, tackle management. Now, hear me out, because tackle management is very complicated. Everybody has their own style in which they like to stay organized. Some guys like to bring everything with them. I don't deem it necessary. I think that being a minimalist on the water can work to your advantage, and only taking it as you start to become more familiar with your fishery and the lures that are actually productive, the weights that you need for the depth that you're going to be fishing, the leaders, sizes you're going to use. Once you start to streamline the gear, and you can go out an 8-ball corner pocket and say, hey, I'm going to go here and I'm going to catch this species this time of the year, and these are all the things that I need, you start to really reduce the amount of items you take out there with you. So you don't need a giant tackle box or even tackle, like big tackle bag, if you will, for the kayak. We're thinking kayak minded. For me, a waterproof tackle tray and a waterproof tackle backpack, waterproof backpack in general, that has good hardware, like is corrosion resistant. The one that I have is a Plano waterproof bag. I think it's the Z series, and there's buckles on it, but there's no zippers or anything. So it's not like I'm worried about something corroding. It is just a backpack, so that at the top of it is Velcro, and I stuff my one spool a liter, my pliers when I first get out, but I'll keep them, in a close access hatch once I get on the water. My liter, small waterproof tackle tray, like a Plano waterproof stowaway that has hooks and a couple lures already ready to go. And I shove that in the backpack. I do have a milk crate behind me that's going to hold that. And that's kind of part of my equation is having just a milk crate or some sort of tub in the back of your kayak that you can store all of your gear is fine. But if you're out there and you're in salt water and water's going to work its way up and down through the scupper plugs in the back, or you're going to take a wave over and a little bit of water might collect in the bottom of your back opening of the kayak. I don't want anything to sit in there. Like I don't want my advertised waterproof tackle tray, which it's supposed to be waterproof, but there's times you dunk it and you ruin all your hooks and stuff. I put everything inside of a bag, and then I just set that bag in the crate, because that way I know that whatever is inside the bag is going to stay dry. And it's all contained in that manner. For half the time kayak fishing, I didn't do that. I threw a couple packs of soft plastics, a little waterproof tackle tray. I had a case for my phone. And there became times where I'm out in the middle of summer. It's 95 degrees out, no wind, and I'm so sweaty. I can't. I got to take my glasses off, and I'm trying to I'm irritated. I'm filtering through this just messy. I'm just envisioning like a 21-year-old in college living room. Like, gosh, where are my pliers? Where's my bug spray? Where's my leader? And I'm sifting through all this stuff in the crate, and that became old pretty quick.
Yeah.
So I've streamlined my gear to just make sure that whatever I take out on the water, that it is waterproof, that it can withstand salt water and the elements, not corrode. And I still have my crate to kind of be the containment for the large item, but the bag is what's going to hold all the specific individual items. And I'm only going to take a handful out there with me.
Yeah.
So that I'm not filtering for one of 20 different things. It's only one of like 4 or 5. That's it.
I like that. So I only bring one tackle tray, and then I actually use my crate and I'm going to go through this real quick because we are really getting up against it here, for drift management stuff. So there are a couple things that you can use. So first and foremost, if you're doing any type of fishing anywhere, I really like having a drift sock. So I have that in my crate. Drift sock is going to help you, especially in a wind versus tide. If the current's ripping, it'll slow you down. So, the current's ripping one way, the wind's going the other way, it'll at least pull you in the correct direction. So I always have a drift sock. The other thing I'm going to say, yes, I do typically carry an anchor, and a brush anchor. And the brush anchor is more for emergencies. If I just need to clip off to some brush on the side of a marshland, it keeps me from getting pulled away by the current. As far as the anchor, I'm going to tell you, do not get an anchor unless you have an anchor trolley. It's a safety issue. You should not be anchoring off the side of your kayak. You also should not be drift socking off the side of your kayak. So use a trolley. Now, that said, full disclosure, I often go off the side for the drift sock, but I also use it intelligently in conditions where it's not going to pull me broadside into chop. If there's chop, I'm not using it unless it's on an anchor trolley. So that's what I throw in my crate, along with way too many gulp baits. So I may bring out $200 worth of gulp baits, but one tray of tackle, a whole bunch of gulp thrown into the crate on top of the drift sock, and the anchor and the brush anchor, and that will sum it up for me. Those are the things that I think everybody should at least consider. Don't use as many gulp as I do. I have way too many with me, but it is what it is. So Justin, hey, we're up against it. So we're gonna have to call it here. But thank you for coming on. Really appreciate it. Great talking with you. I always learn a lot. Thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll catch you in the next one. Until then, get out there, get on the water, and get some tight lines.
'Cause fishing, it's in my soul. It was passed down to me from the days of old. Find us on the water if there